The Cleveland Browns have done it again, proving that there is not one single organization in all of pro sports worse than them. Plus, we're ranking the top 32 defensive tackles on today's episode of the Grey Duck NFL Show. Hello and welcome to the Grey Duck NFL Show. I'm your host, Josh Kolojeski, and each week we deliver thoughtful analysis, clear-eyed discussion, and informed perspectives on the National Football League, covering the games, trends, performances, and storylines that define the season. Whether you follow every snap or simply enjoy sharp football conversation, you're in the right place, so let's get started. And the Grey Duck NFL Show is a part of the Grey Duck Sports Network. Follow us on Twitter and YouTube at Grey Duck Sports. We're on TikTok as well at grey.duck.sports. Like, subscribe, comment, whatever you can do to interact with us on all of those platforms. We've got 3 different podcasts on the Grey Duck Sports Network, as well as a series of shorts that we continue to work on throughout the calendar year. Again, that is at Grey Duck Sports on both Twitter and YouTube, and at grey.duck.sports over on TikTok. Today's show is going to feature a lot on the social side of the NFL. Some things that have happened in the last week or so, where the news is just as much about the football as it is on the off-the-field sort of stuff. So get prepared for a lot of that. We're going to be talking about the new quarterback in Cleveland, or the old quarterback, some may say, in Cleveland. We're going to talk about some journalistic ethics and how it had to do with one current Buffalo Bill and his current situation. And we'll have a continued discourse, unfortunately, on the domestic abuse violations that seemingly pop up across the NFL every single month. All of that and more. Plus, at the very end of the show, we're going to count down the top 32 defensive tackles as part of the Grey Duck 250 list, and where we are ranking the top 250 NFL players heading into the 2026 season who we think are going to have the best years, going position by position on each Grey Duck NFL Show episode in order to come to a final 250 list before the regular season starts on Wednesday, September 9th, just a couple of weeks from today. But let's first talk about the preseason week number 2 and run down the scores really quick, because we are just that much closer to the regular season. The Las Vegas Raiders earn a 22-20 win over Houston. San Francisco 49-17 over the Los Angeles Chargers. The Jets blank the Pittsburgh Steelers 17-0. Carolina doubles up Jacksonville 34-17. Green Bay with a 33-13 win over Denver. Detroit sneaks past Washington 17-13. Atlanta blows out Indianapolis 34-6. The Buffalo Bills with a big 31-7 win over Cleveland. Baltimore is able to win a defensive battle against Minnesota 13-3. New York, the Giants win 26-3 over Miami. The Los Angeles Rams shut down the New Orleans Saints 34-0. Cincinnati with a 27-9 win over Chicago. New England beats Philadelphia 24-21. Tampa Bay and Kansas City, that score is 16-15 in favor of the Buccaneers. The Dallas Cowboys beat Arizona 34-13, and the Tennessee Titans take down the Seattle Seahawks 19-16. Not a whole lot as we get into the second and third games of the preseason, and you are starting to see starters play less and less, and more of the focus shifts to some of the rookies and perhaps roster bubble guys on every team's roster. And I'm sure you probably know your specific team's bubble guys better than even I do, or most of the national NFL pundits commenting on it. But I wanted to run down a few winners and losers that I was able to see during my time watching the preseason games over the last week or so. And the first winner has got to be the guy coming out of Atlanta with a chance to win the starting quarterback job. That looked like a very much outside chance at the beginning of training camp, now has become at least within the realm of possibility, and that is Minnesota State Moorhead quarterback Jack Strand, or former Minnesota State Moorhead quarterback Jack Strand. He had a huge game for the Atlanta Falcons in their win against the Indianapolis Colts. He was throwing the ball all over the field. When I watched Jack Strand in my college scouting, I did eventually get to the Minnesota State Moorhead product, not as if there was a ton of All-22 film out there of a Division II guy, but it was a player who I always saw with a quick release, great anticipation when he saw the field the right way, about a league average arm. I think that showed up pretty well on the preseason, but the main issue was his ability to process defenses and get off of his first read. Now, I haven't broken down the Atlanta film to that extent at this point to see if this was just similar to when he had success at Minnesota State Mankato, where he got to the first read. That one just happened to be the one that was open, and for whatever reason, against a vanilla Indianapolis Colts preseason defense, there just was nothing too complicated to process for him. So much so that it made even a Division II defense look very non-rudimentary. So I wouldn't be able to judge on that basis. And for what we know right now, Michael Penix is starting to take more first-team reps. I think he just recently got cleared to play, so there's a chance that Penix is still the number one quarterback for the Falcons when September 12th rolls around and the Week 1 gets underway. But I think Tua probably still in the driver's seat, tentatively so. Jack Strand is in, as Brian Regan would say, in the middle back with his feet on the hump. That's where he would always, call in his comedy special, call to sit in between his brothers, because he knew he wasn't going to get shotgun anyway. That is where Jack Strand is. But it's not too strenuous to move yourself from that back seat, one row up and one seat over, to the shotgun position, or to even driving the car. And that is a position that Jack Strand has put himself into with this excellent game that he had against the Colts. Don't have the numbers in front of me, but we all saw the highlights on social media, and it was impressive throw after impressive throw. Now, a lot of open receivers on those impressive throws, but you'll take him hitting those open receivers rather than the alternative. So it all goes good as gravy for Jack Strand in the end. I don't know if there's real chance that he ends up getting any even roster spot on this Atlanta Falcons team, but he certainly made the discussion within the coaching rooms, within the coaching staff, and between Matt Ryan and Ian Cunningham and whoever else is making decisions in that Atlanta front office. It made those discussions a lot more difficult. So those guys are going to have to earn their paycheck and decide if they want to cut a guy that put out such good preseason film and try to sneak him through waivers onto the practice squad, or if they just want to keep him as their third, maybe second quarterback, and maybe one day during the 2026 season he gets a start this year. Who knows? Crazier things have happened. I remember Todd Bauman was a Division II quarterback from Minnesota school that won NFC Player of the Week after he filled in for Dante Culpepper after a season-ending injury for him at the end of the 2001 season. So stranger things have happened, or just as strange things have happened. We're not going to write Jack Strand completely out of the 2026 narrative just yet. Keep an eye on him. Now, DeJon Stribling is a more solidified part of this future 2026 narrative. He is the wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers. He was their first draft pick of the 2026 draft in the second round. Some guys said that he was the best wide receiver in the draft. I disagreed, but what he's putting up on preseason film is showing some signs of a capable wide receiver at the NFL level, and that is something that San Francisco probably is desperately going to need throughout the course of this season with all of the injuries that they have incurred, including, of course, the season-ending injury that we've talked ad nauseum about for Ricky Pearsall. He is not going to play any snaps during the 2026 campaign. Mike Evans has dealt with injuries during training camp as well as the last few years as a member of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jacob Cowing, short, quick, punt return, touchdown. Guy that I like. I don't know if he can be a consistent part of a high-octane offense. George Kittle coming back from injury. DeJon Stribling is going to have the opportunity open for him to make a real name for himself early on in his 49ers tenure. I think he's going to get fed a lot. Him and Christian McCaffrey are going to get the bulk of those targets early on, especially if it takes Mike Evans, a little bit to get up to speed after dealing with the injury earlier on in training camp. Now, that'll means that DeJon Stribling is going to have to stay healthy, with which the when we have the substation there, taking away all of the healthy cells in our body, I guess, that might be too tall of a task to ask for. But his numbers so far, he's putting up, I think, 11 catches, 221 yards. Those are good numbers to have. And yes, they're just preseason. And yes, the story and example I'm going to use is completely anecdotal, 100%. It would not work in any form of debate if I was trying to make a point for DeJon Stribling as a good wide receiver option for San Francisco moving forward based solely on preseason play. It wouldn't be that point. It is one singular example of a player that I can remember who had an excellent preseason as a rookie, and that is Randy Moss, who in 1998 caught 4 touchdowns in 4 preseason games, was over 250 receiving yards, was making big play after big play, and giving Vikings fans and all of the NFL a sneak preview of who he was going to be during the 1998 regular season and beyond. So if DeJon Stribling, not putting up those mammoth numbers necessarily, but if he can at least show those glimpses, we can for now treat it as a potential sneak preview of what he will do during the 2026 season. And that is being a high volume, short underneath, intermediate target sort of guy that Brock Purdy loves to feed often. That is what San Francisco needs. That is what they have. We'll see if it translates once he faces tougher competition, once the regular season hits, but he certainly has that one of those top 2 wide receiver spots on lockdown on that 49ers roster. And then Caden McDonald had a nice little sack. Caden McDonald was my favorite defensive tackle. He might have been my 5th or 6th player overall from the 2026 draft. One, because he just can't get, you can't push past him in the run game. He is going to 2-gap you right at the nose all game long. And, I mean, he's probably going to be used more as a 1 technique in the Houston 4-down lineman, 4-3 attacking defensive line. But even so, that just gives him a bigger gap to try and push through, and only has him responsible for 1 gap against the run. So if you're going to do that, if you're going to have him just responsible for 1 gap against the run, you're going to stop the run more often than not, especially when they try, opposing teams, that is, try to run it up the middle against you. They're going to run right into Caden McDonald. That was never in question by, I think, any scout or self-proclaimed scout, for that matter, when it came to breaking down Caden McDonald's film at Ohio State and projecting what he could be at the NFL level. That was never a question. The question was, could he be more than a Tyleik Williams and be a pass rusher? And most folks said no. They didn't see a polished pass rusher. And I didn't necessarily see a polished pass rusher, but I saw a guy that could win easily with leverage. And a lot of the times, even if he wasn't getting pressure, was pushing the pocket back. And it is not too big of a leap to assume if he can do that, and if he constantly plays with good leverage and with a good solid anchor and has all of that explosive force from underneath him, he can transition into becoming a adequate, if not good, pass rusher. And again, 1 snap we're talking about from preseason, but he gets a sack. He's able to explode right through the gap and get to the quarterback in Houston's loss to the Las Vegas Raiders. And really, that whole Houston Texans defense put together a pretty good game, so things are looking good for Caden McDonald. I hope that he can keep that pass rushing repertoire moving so that I can be vindicated in putting him as my number 5 or number 6 guy from this 2026 NFL draft. Then Geno Smith also with a good game for the New York Jets. He's going to be their starting quarterback this year. I think the Jets have the potential to be somewhat of a sneaky team. We'll see if that means being anywhere close to the postseason, or if it just means 3rd place in the AFC East instead of 2nd place. But Geno Smith putting together some good film. It was a disaster around him in Las Vegas. It wasn't just his fault that he had a bad season last year. It was a lot his fault, but it wasn't all his fault. And he's just 2 years removed from a pretty good season, albeit turnover heavy, from when he was in his last year with Seattle. So if he can get back to that form of Geno Smith, then the Jets have an actually capable offense this year, which they didn't have at any point last year, with either Justin Fields or Brady Cook taking the majority of the snaps, or Tyrod Taylor, for that matter. And Jermod McCoy, we have seen now 2 healthy games from Jermod McCoy. The major concern with him, because he was a first-round pedigree sort of prospect, that even up until, I think, the day before the draft was getting first-round hype, even with some of these medical concerns. Ended up going in the 4th round because of a potential degenerative knee injury that at some point is going to need a season-ending knee surgery, is basically what the consensus among doctors is, or at least what reporters are saying. The consensus among the doctors that they've talked to is that one day he is going to need to have a season-ending surgery. That could be this year, that could be next year. We don't know when that is, but the good news is right now he is playing for the Raiders in preseason. He's getting a lot of snaps. Sometimes he's looked good. He's had some maybe issues in coverage, but more often than not, I would put him in a glass 3/4 full, glass 1/4 empty sort of bin. And I like what I've seen from Jermod McCoy on that Raiders defense. If he can be the first-round pedigree prospect that he was right off the bat for Las Vegas, I really like that, because he can mirror opposing wide receivers well and sticks with them in coverage all the way through. And then finally, Jonathan Brooks gets his first career NFL touchdown. Obviously, this one not official, but you love to see that for a guy that has just dealt with knee injury after knee injury after knee injury, going all the way back to his time in college during his last year. Coming into the draft, he was looked at as a potential first-round pick. For sure, the first running back off the board. And he tears his ACL. And then he tears his ACL again. And he might have torn it a 3rd time. I'm not exactly sure where we are on the timeline of all of those injuries. But a lot of injuries in Jonathan Brooks' past. I think he's going to be a sleeper pick for fantasy or for any other reasons. When you look at the box scores every Sunday at the end of the night, you're going to see Jonathan Brooks with a lot of good games. And hopefully that started with the touchdown. Granted, a 4-yard touchdown. Nothing super impressive about it, outside of the fact that he has overcome so much to get to the point to be scoring a touchdown in the preseason. Now let's see if that carries over again into meaningful reps come the regular season. And then some losers from the preseason. J.J. McCarthy, I'm a big Vikings fan. He has looked dreadful, not only last week, but the week prior. One really big throw down the field to Ty Felton that went for like 50-some yards. I think more of the praise should go to Ty Felton there for going up and making a big catch on something that he had come back for. And then McCarthy, just a dreadful series in the red zone after that big Ty Felton catch, where he misses a read on a tight end going into the corner of the end zone wide open, and instead decides to chuck into the flat despite looking at the tight end and pumping towards the tight end. And then inaccuracies in the back of the end zone to Ty Felton on 3rd down or 2nd down. They ran it on 3rd down, 4th down, over the head of Miles Price in the flat, open for what would have been a touchdown. Missed 3 different touchdowns on the end of that drive, even with the big play downfield to Ty Felton. The timing is not there with JJ. He does not look comfortable. He does not look confident. The game seems too fast for him, and if that is the case, his time on the Vikings roster might be soon coming to an end. I'm not sure they're going to be necessarily willing to just straight up give up on him, but if they're able to get something in return, that is becoming more and more of a possibility. He is no longer the guy that he was in the final 4 games of last season. For whatever reason, he has regressed to even at points worse than his lowest moments with the Minnesota Vikings in 2025. And that is ultimately very disappointing to see. Fernando Mendoza had a rough game, had some ups, mostly downs, pick 6, showing that he is still human. I think we all knew that, but he certainly is human at the quarterback position. And, you know, I think that closes the book for the most part on any serious consideration for Fernando Mendoza being the week 1 starting quarterback for Las Vegas among the Raiders coaching staff. I think that means Kirk Cousins has got it locked down as Fernando Mendoza just works out those finer details in his game. I think he's still going to be a good quarterback. It just might not be until next year or later in this year after Kirk gets his run. And then Will Howard, you could say Drew Aller too, but Drew Aller made a couple of nice throws in the Steelers' loss, in which they put up 0 points against the New York Jets. But Will Howard looked pretty dreadful. And I think if you're choosing a quarterback to at this point, based on preseason film behind Aaron Rodgers, it's not Mason Rudolph, it's not Will Howard, it's got to be Drew Aller. And that could mean that Will Howard is the odd man out in that 4-person quarterback room if they are just kicking one odd man out and not kicking just two to keep 2 quarterbacks only on their active roster. That would be kind of a change from what we heard during the offseason, where a lot of the team was happy with Will Howard's performance and was excited about what he could bring for the future. I was never among that camp, but there were reports coming out of Steelers headquarters. And that is your preseason winners and losers. One more week of preseason before we finally get to the real thing and we start actually breaking these games down, watching play-by-play, and diving into every possible angle to bring the great analysis that we pride ourselves here on the Grey Duck NFL show right to you on wherever it is that you are currently following us. But as we wait for that fated day that the regular season begins, let us talk about the Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson, really bad start for the Browns in preseason game number 2. Looked awful. Was outplayed clearly by Shedeur Sanders. Was getting booed by the Cleveland Browns fans, and after the game had some comments to make to the post-game media and saying that he didn't feel like the boos were necessarily having to do with his performance, but were more so a personal thing that he thought is unfair. And he made reference to the fact that when he tore his Achilles for the 2024 version of the Cleveland Browns, there were cheers in that stadium. I'm not sure how accurate that is. I'm sure there were probably some cheers. I don't know if it was overly rambunctious cheering for that injury by Watson, which ended up keeping him out until now, the start of the 2026 season. And kind of, pointed some daggers at the Cleveland Browns fan base. Said, this is the same fan base that did that to me, so that's just something that I'm going to have to get used to. Get off the cross, Jesus. There is pure martyrdom coming from Deshaun Watson right now. It is ridiculous to think, on a couple of different levels. One, that you're worthy of us just glossing over the personal choices that you have made that have shown you to be a truly disgusting human being. But let's just put all of that aside. They are booing you because you suck. You have never once been relevant as a member of the Cleveland Browns. The team has been better off with old Joe Flacco leading this offense than it has with Deshaun Watson. You can't read a defense anymore. You have a lot of the same troubles that I see from J.J. McCarthy and Bryce Young when he was bad poured into one. You just continue to fall back, roll back, fade away from pressure, shuffle around it, don't step up into the pocket, get scared of contact because you're so injury prone, and then throw it underneath or throw an interception. That's your game with Cleveland for the last, ever since you were brought in here and got over the 11-game suspension in 2022, over the last 4 to 5 years now. If your play was good, trust me, sports fans are not the most moral creatures. We're not going, I don't want to put myself into this, but your baseline fan is not going to boo you no matter how atrocious your past behavior has been if you are putting up good numbers. We've seen that with Karl Malone, a guy that had sex with a 12-year-old while he was 19 and got her pregnant, and yet throughout his career was heralded as one of the best players, was never really booed, and even today the NBA still honors him. Kobe Bryant, who was essentially verbally agreed that he committed rape by saying, I at first thought it was consensual, but I now see that the victim does not see it that way, in an official statement as part of the settlement. So in order for something to be consensual, both parties have to agree. So Kobe thought it was consensual at first, but now he sees and agrees that she didn't see it that way, which means not consensual. Ergo, it was non-consensual sex. Ergo, it was rape. Ergo, Kobe, through this statement, admitted verbally to raping her. And still, no, we are going to celebrate that player despite his past atrocities. And even in Cleveland, Kareem Hunt, who we have video of kicking a woman like a field goal, was praised by Browns fans for the years that he was able to form a really good 1-2 punch with Nick Chubb. So no, the Cleveland Browns fans, and again, baseline NFL fans, don't care about your past transgressions. It's not personal. It's because you are a bad NFL quarterback. Straight up. Sorry that you don't that you think it's different, but it's not just personal. Although I'm not going to say that it is not personal to any extent, because let's not forget that there are 33 different, I think at this point, correct me if I'm wrong with the number, 33 different separate accounts, unique accounts from massage parlors all across Houston of sexual assault allegedly committed by Deshaun Watson during his time with the Texans from 2016 until he was ultimately traded in 2022. Now, the allegations first started coming out prior to the 2021 season. That's where it all started to get rolling. So most of those between 2016 and 2020. I don't think it matters when, but it would be an infinitesimal percent chance that every single one of these proves to be untrue when there are 33 different accounts coming from 33 separate parties, many of which have never interacted with one another. Stories that have corroborated with each other. They absolutely should boo you. You deserve the boos based on the personal issues. I'm not going to go so far to say that you deserve getting cheered when your Achilles gets torn, but I'm also not going to say that I'm going to shed a tear when your Achilles gets torn because of the person that you are. I'm sorry that you don't have self-awareness. I'm sorry that that is a big deal, that is a problem to you, but get over yourself. This is your last year in the NFL. So if I were you, I'd stop trying to burn bridges with the fans who are going to be connected to this team long after you are thankfully gone. But for now, the Cleveland Brown fans are going to have to stick with Deshaun Watson as their starting quarterback because despite Todd Monken kind of throwing the comments back into Deshaun Watson's face and saying, no, I think the boos were probably because of the quarterback play. Despite all of that, on Monday, Deshaun Watson is named the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland, you are a failure of an organization. Baltimore should take another one of your teams. Baltimore should take the Guardians, too. Baltimore should take the Cleveland Cavaliers. Get them all out of there because of how horseshit this Cleveland Browns organization is. How terribly mismanaged by a guy that made a nice little travel stop for truckers. How bad it has been. Flying J pilot, I don't know what it is. Whatever it is, it's, not Buc-ee's. I don't even like Buc-ee's. It's just, there's one in Arizona that popped up, and it's on my mind. I haven't gone there. Want to check it out before I make a judgment on it. But it's just ridiculous. What are we doing at this point? And I think Todd Monken is doing the smart thing here. I'm sure that this mandate came from no one else but the owner of the Cleveland Browns. 100%. No doubt in my mind. And that mandate probably didn't come just yesterday on Monday. We're recording this on Monday night, releasing it on Tuesday. That mandate probably came during the offseason, where Todd Monken slowly started to soft launch this Deshaun Watson at starting quarterback campaign, where he said, oh yeah, Watson looks really good in minicamp, and the ball got rolling from there. But Todd Monken also doesn't want his future. I mean, because with Watson at quarterback, you might be gone after 1 year through no fault of your own. But he doesn't want his future job prospects to hinge on, oh, that's the guy that made the decision to start Deshaun Watson. No, Todd Monken, with the timing of this announcement, wanted it to be absolutely clear, in no uncertain terms, that yes, it was the owner, it was not me making this call. Because Monken, who made the comments the other day that yes, it's bad quarterback play, after Deshaun Watson's worst, terrible start, after he got thoroughly outplayed by Shedeur Sanders, after he made comments after the game that Monken disagreed with, those two starting to butt heads, and then Monken saying Deshaun Watson is our starting quarterback, is Monken saying, I am not making this decision. You saw through my actions that I do not agree with this decision. It is Jimmy Haslam alone that is making this decision because he doesn't want to go with the sunk cost fallacy. Doesn't want to pay $40 million to sit on the bench when he is healthy. And so Todd Monken wanted to make sure that any future employer that sees why did you start Deshaun Watson could look at the circumstances surrounding the situation and say, oh, okay, yeah, it was pretty obvious that you didn't want this, and it happened anyway because your owner is absolutely delusional and has no moral compass. The good news there is maybe it makes Cleveland. I don't know how far they would have gone with Shedeur Sanders. I'm not saying that Shedeur Sanders is an excellent quarterback by any means. I think Dylan Gabriel is absolutely terrible. I think Deshaun Watson as a quarterback, not as a human, is better than Dylan Gabriel. But I think Shedeur Sanders at this point is better than Deshaun Watson, or at least what we've seen with him since he joined the Cleveland Browns. This is going to be a disaster. And I guess the saving grace for Cleveland is that you hope that it gets you a really good pick. Top 1, top 2, top 3. With the multiple first-round picks that you already own, because you have the Rams pick as well, you can get a quarterback and a really good and historical draft class, you would think. A great role player at a premium position as well. Role player is the wrong word. Just a great standout player at a premium position. That is the silver lining. That is what you're hoping for. Maybe if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, the Guardians, I believe, have the final wildcard spot in the AL as we're recording this. Watch the pennant race through September. Blue Jackets maybe in October that Cleveland can go on a little bit of a run, and then the Blue Jackets get started. Ohio State's playing, and you've got the Cleveland Cavaliers. You can just forget about the 2026 season, at least until Deshaun Watson is obviously benched at some point in this season. And early on in this season, most likely. I think that is going to happen, and maybe Shedeur Sanders can prove himself to be a good starting quarterback. We shall see. Moving on from one disaster to absolute tragedy in Buffalo, Ed Oliver, defensive tackle, who you're going to see on our top 32 defensive tackle list later on in tonight's show. It was revealed involuntarily that his 2-year-old son passed away in a drowning incident at his home on June 28th, I believe. And that Ed Oliver has been dealing with this personal tragedy while also dealing with an injury. I cannot imagine the unspeakable, unimaginable grief that Ed Oliver went through, is going through, and will go through for the rest of his life because of the death of his 2-year-old son. It is, again, maybe this saying loses its meaning because it's said so often, but it truly is every parent's worst nightmare. I have 5 kids of my own, and I cannot imagine where I would be. I would not be ready to play football. I don't think I'd be ready to do anything ever again. I don't think I would survive very much longer. So, to Ed Oliver's credit, he is against all odds doing all of that and showed up to training camp, has been dealing with an injury, and has wanted to keep this out of the public light. Not because there's anything sketchy going on behind the scenes, but because it's just a reminder of grief that can be a umbrella that haunts you in every single aspect. At least you can psychologically compartmentalize for the hours that you're on the football field, that you hope that you can escape that grief. Not escape it, but occupy your brain with something else for a little bit. And then we've got this article that drops on Substack. Tony Farmer is his name. Don't go up and look up his Substack. Don't give him any more subscribers. An absolutely tone-deaf article in which he first implies that the Buffalo Bills are covering up, kind of, not covering up, but they are saying that he says that the injury that the Bills allege that Oliver has, when we look at the timeline in just a second, we're going to see that this theory is ludicrous. But he says that the Bills say that he has an injury because he is dealing with this personal tragedy, and Tony Farmer has uncovered the personal tragedy. Tony Farmer breaks the news that on June 28th that Ed Oliver's 2-year-old son drowned in a pool. Good for you, Tony. You're not winning a Pulitzer for that. You're not Pablo Torre finds out. You're not the Washington Post in the Watergate scandal. You're none of that. You're an asshole. And now I want to say that technically, yes, there is nothing that is ethically wrong from a journalistic sense with reporting on public information like this. Nothing inherently wrong about it from a purely, journalistic integrity sort of sense. You have every right to report it. You can say, and as he has been screaming on his Twitter, that yes, I should be saying this. Yes, I don't have any regrets about revealing this information. There's no journalistic standard that says that you don't have to do that. Loved ones have been notified. It's been 2 months. Yes, you have that right. But Jeff Goldblum once said in Jurassic Park, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. You were too busy thinking about whether you could do it that you never stopped to realize whether or not you should have. If we're talking about a situation where the Bills were trying to cover up something heinous, that let's just move away from the tragedy so that we don't conflate these two things. But that, that Ed Oliver did, like he was drunk driving or something, or there was a domestic assault, or, he stole $500,000. Yes, I think there is a journalistic obligation in that case to uncover those truths. When the Minnesota Vikings completely almost ignore their part in the death of Corey Stringer during the 2001 training camp and do everything they can to say that they had no idea that what was very clearly heat stroke was happening to Corey Stringer when it was pretty clear. If you can uncover things about that, then yes, go ahead and do so. If you can uncover things about Ray Rice, something that's been hidden, and you find a videotape, yes, you have a journalistic obligation to do something. But in this case, there is nothing nefarious going on around the scenes, behind the scenes, I should say. This is a personal tragedy that people, and Tony Farmer's probably not the only one that could find this, and probably not the only one that knew about this, but that has no obligation to be urgently reported on. there is no reason to do it other than you want to get some followers to your Substack, which is fucking pathetic. Everyone else that knew about this and sat on it is not sitting on it because they're trying to help the Buffalo Bills with some large conspiratorial cover-up. They are sitting on it because they understand human decency. And they understand that when a family asks for their personal, for this to stay under wraps right now, and it is clear that those reasons are not nefarious, that, foul play wasn't suggested, that this was just a complete accident and a complete tragedy, and they want their privacy and they want their space in this moment, then even if it is not unethically journalistically, I think it is unethical from a pure human sense. And if you don't understand that, then you are what Tony Farmer is, and that is an asshole. Curt Schilling, remember him? He revealed Tim Wakefield had cancer. Tim Wakefield dies, and he didn't want his last year on Earth being known as the guy who had cancer. He didn't want that known. And Curt Schilling spoke it out into the ether, and everybody railed on Curt Schilling for that. Rightfully so. Because Tim Wakefield wasn't hiding his cancer diagnosis in order to, get some sort of edge in his life or to cover up something in his past. He was doing it because he just didn't want to deal with all of the stuff that comes with publicly announcing that you have cancer, and wanted to just focus on being private with his family for the final year of his life. And Curt Schilling ruined that. And Tony Farmer is ruining the way the Oliver family is trying to cope with an unimaginable grief, an uncopable grief, and is just seeking attention, seeking clicks. And it's not being a journalist. It is being self-serving and being a businessman. A callous businessman at that. Shame on Tony Farmer. Shame on anyone that sticks up for Tony Farmer in this. Because yes, if things are being covered up because of nefarious things, yes, there's a journalistic obligation to uncover those things. That is not the case here. Let the family grieve. Eventually it will come out. There is no reason for you to be the one, against all wishes, for it to break this story at this very moment. Be a better human. I don't care about who you are as a journalist. Be a better human. Speaking of being a better human, Rashad Bateman, wide receiver, Baltimore Ravens, stemming from an incident back in June, is potentially facing some NFL discipline. We will see if it gets to that point. I have my doubts, like I do in all of these sorts of cases, but allegedly Rashad Bateman, I believe in June, shattered the window of the car of the mother of his child while the mother and 3-month-old child were both in the vehicle, and glass from him shattering the window created lacerations. I don't think in the infant's case, but in the mother of the infant, stemming from an argument, just pure anger, pure rage, breaking a window, pure immaturity from Rashad Bateman right there. Domestic violence, 100%. Being bad. Like, I understand that people get angry, but there has to be an extent of which you control your emotions or your actions off of your emotions. There is not an excuse, no matter how angry you are in that instance, not an excuse outside of, and I can't even think of a case where this would be true, where you have to shatter a window to use to protect yourself from lethal force or self-defense in any sort of way, but I guess that would be the only defense that I would deem acceptable. When you have a 3-month-old child in the car, not to mention, not to downplay the humanity of the mother of that child. But when you have a 3-month-old child in the car and you're breaking the window, that is an absolutely egregious thing to do. And not only was there a 3-month-old child, but there was also someone who has an equal amount of humanity in that child's mother, where that glass could sever an artery. I know it's not like super likely, but that could happen. Could sever a major artery if it nicks the right place. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But you're not thinking, you're enraged, and you are making dumb mistakes. And the NFL needs to get these guys to understand that this domestic violence is not okay. Like, that it's not going to be accepted in this league. Heavier suspensions, heavier fines. These guys, Rashad Bateman, should not be making any money for the first half of this season. That is how severe the consequences of this should be. So that every time that Rashad Bateman or anyone else gets so enraged at a significant other, or anyone for that matter, that maybe there's a slight chance that they think if I do this action, I'm going to miss out on millions of dollars. I think the NFL has a responsibility to do that, and I don't have any faith that they are going to hold their athletes responsible at this moment. Josh Jacobs is still practicing with the Packers. There are credible accounts of his domestic abuse against his significant other from multiple sources. Multiple independent sources. And yet there's been nothing. And the Packers are, Matt LaFleur is like, yeah, we're just going to keep treating it like it's football. The NFL needs to throw the hammer down on these domestic violence cases. And I know I've said that before. I'm going to say that every single time that one of these instances come up, because it is not something that we should just be defeated by. It is something that the NFL needs to know that every time it happens, we're going to be loud. We're going to be voicing our opinions that this cannot happen with your players, that their consequences need to be severe, and that they have to recognize that playing in the NFL is a privilege. And if you cannot be a decent human being, and if you are endangering the life or, of your infant son and his mother, there has to be some consequence. Rashad Bateman should not play for the first half of the season for the Baltimore Ravens. And I think that's even being too lenient. Moving right along, we go to Nick Chubb. He retires from the NFL. He obviously, when we talk about Jonathan Brooks, all the knee injuries that Jonathan Brooks had, Nick Chubb has followed a pretty similar career arc where in Georgia, he's playing running back for them. He suffers a just catastrophic knee injury at that time. Comes back, plays well, and ends up being drafted in the second round by the Cleveland Browns and almost immediately becomes a strong rushing force for the Browns. Every single one of his seasons early on, he was averaging over 5 yards per carry. That was a regular thing with Nick Chubb. That doesn't typically happen with many running backs. Adrian Peterson, for example, had in his first season a 5.4 yards per carry average, and then it was 4.5, 4.4, 4.7, all that, until then 2012 when he has a 6 yards per carry average, and then it wasn't consistent is what I'm trying to say. He had really good seasons, but it wasn't this sort of consistency of 5 yards per carry, 5.2 yards per carry, That is an incredible number to put up year after year after year with no decline in your play. And then another catastrophic knee injury happens in the 2023 season, in which he had already gotten off to a pretty good start. And from that point on, that kind of derailed the rest of his NFL career. He misses the rest of 2023. He comes back in 2024, is not the same guy, goes to Houston in 2025, gets his yards per carry at above 4, which was better than it was in 2024, but overall, just not the same player, not the same explosiveness, not the same power. And he hangs it up at the age of 30. So here's to you, Nick Chubb. Great career. We are all luckier football fans for have watching you played from 2018 until now. Thank you for that privilege, and all the best to you in your post NFL career. Probably not a Hall of Famer, but certainly a guy that is going to go down in the Hall of Very, Very Good. Vita Vea finally got his extension for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That is pivotal because I think he is the key to any success the Buccaneers are going to have on defense this year. He unlocks a lot of other guys' potential because he demands double teams, and if he is demanding a double team, everyone else has the opportunity to just go one-on-one and beat guys based purely on talent. And it takes a whole lot off the plate of other players on his team. Vita Vea was it's kind of an extension. He gets 1 year added onto his current contract. Vita Vea came into camp holding in, demanding a trade. Strong idea that was a negotiation tactic. That proves to be true. But he does get himself paid pretty well and guarantees his entire salary throughout. So he's going to get paid moving up from $18 million to $24 million, all guaranteed in 2026. And then they added a year in 2027 and are going to pay him $24 million, all guaranteed in 2027 as well. So $48 million guaranteed. There goes the payday to one Vita Vea, who is one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. You can find out exactly where later on in the show once we get to our top 32 defensive tackles ratings. But he, again, makes that Buccaneers defense go. If you can, free up Reuben Bain and David Walker to have one-on-ones on the edges all throughout the season, I think that defense becomes a lot more dangerous in Tampa Bay, and the Buccaneers, if they weren't already the favorites in the NFC South, certainly solidify themselves in that position. Final piece of big news before, I guess we got a couple that happened today. Jed York. Hard to blame the substation on this one. Jed York, I don't want to make too light of this situation just yet because I don't know if it's been revealed what kind of sting operation this was, if it was just a prostitution sting, or if it was I'm Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC sort of sting. But Jed York he's the owner of the 49ers and is in East Palestine, Ohio. I don't know where in Ohio that is. But he's in East Palestine, Ohio, and decides that he needs a release. And so I don't know how he finds someone that is soliciting sex who lives in a trailer park and who is charging $140. And, Jed York decides that's a good idea. Turns out to be a sting operation in an attempt to curb human trafficking. Jed York is arrested for 2 misdemeanor charges. So if we want to talk about, and again, if this was a consenting adult, I don't want to say sympathy. I have more empathy in that situation. I don't know if it's been confirmed that, yes, these would have been consenting adults, like he perceived that it was a consenting adult and not a minor. Obviously, if it comes out in the future that it was a minor, then yeah, he needs to lose control of the 49ers once and for all, and hopefully Roger Goodell would have a way to do that. Again, it's the NFL. I am not going to be too confident that any moral standing is there among the commissioners, owners, NFL Players Association, for that matter. But Jed York getting himself into trouble. Hopefully this is just, this was a consenting adult, and we can just laugh at the fact that a billionaire went to East Palestine, Ohio, to pay $140 for a prostitute. Because I think the headline is pretty funny, if it is 2 consenting adults. All right. And then finally, Kayshon Boutte being traded from the New England Patriots. We kind of thought this was coming after they brought in Romeo Doubs and A.J. Brown. Kayshon Boutte was one of the kind of the number 2 receiver behind Stephon Diggs in the Patriots offense last year. And he gets traded to the Houston Texans, I believe for a safety and like a 7th or 6th round pick in 2028. I like this move for Houston. One, because the only guy that seemed to be Derek Stingley's kryptonite was Kayshon Boutte whenever he played with Drake May. always seemed to beat him deep. And then Derek Stingley was able to stop everybody else except for Kayshon Boutte. So now Derek Stingley doesn't have to worry about it except for in practice. And then 2, obviously, this plays into the Jayden Higgins injury, which we have not talked about since last week's show. He tore his ACL in training camp. Second-year player, really good on the release. Routes sometimes can be a little hit or miss in terms of the timing of them because sometimes he likes to do one move too many. Had a couple of drops, but overall I think was a player that Houston fans were confident was going to take a pretty good step forward this year in his second season. He tears his ACL. The Texans need another wide receiver to kind of pair up opposite of Nico Collins. I mean, they have Tank Dell, Jalen Noel. Those guys are lighter in the slot sort of players. You want somebody that can take the press coverage on the line of scrimmage, the physicality that brings when you line them up, kind of like an X guy. You want Nico Collins to be that sometimes, but you also want to let him come off of the line of scrimmage at times so that he doesn't have to always deal with press coverage. And Kayshon Boutte allows you to do just that. Physical receiver, deep threat wide receiver, very good hands. I think that is... In pure 2026, it might be better than what Jayden Higgins would have been expected to provide for the Houston Texans offense. I think that I think it's more of a push, but I think an argument can certainly be made that it is actually an upgrade, at least for the 2026 season. I think the future is brighter for Jayden Higgins in 2027 and beyond, but the torn ACL, certainly a bump in the road there. Other injuries, Taylor Biadasz on the injured reserve list. He has ACL damage. I don't think they've confirmed that it is an ACL tear. It has just been diagnosed as ACL damage at this point, but it requires season-ending knee surgery. He was a free agent pickup by the Los Angeles Chargers, who dealt with season-ending injuries to both of their all-pro tackles last year, and Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, and it was a mess of an offensive line all season. And they tried to solidify that by trying to beef up the interior and bring in Tyler Biadasz, and now that is gone. So the hit's already starting to come for this Chargers offensive line. I think if this Chargers offensive line is better, at least league average this year, which I think they would have been a shoo-in to be at the very least with Tyler Biadasz at center, assuming health of all parties involved. I think this offense can be a real threat in the AFC. Not only the AFC West, but just like the AFC in general, to contend for an AFC title. Without Tyler Biadasz, I'm not going to drop them completely out of like playoff contention, but it certainly hurts, and it makes it seem like they're a lot more similar, not all the way, because Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, bringing those two back, obviously, 2 big upgrades. But it points me more towards feeling like this is a 2025 Chargers team again, and kind of gets you in that sort of mood. So hopefully they are able to replace Tyler Biadasz. Danny Pinter, center for the Baltimore Ravens. He was going to be the heir apparent to Taylor Linderbaum. He has a torn patellar tendon. I wasn't able to see how long he is going to be out. And then Alex Wright, the edge rusher for the Cleveland Browns, who was going to see... who had a pretty good year and small sample size last year statistically, and was going to see those snaps obviously increase a little bit in 2026 now with Myles Garrett off of the team. Alex Wright has torn his Achilles and is out for the year, and the Browns decide to bring in Derek Barnett to kind of fill in the hole that Alex Wright left. Derek Barnett, fine, not great. I would have liked Alex Wright better. Probably a downgrade, but what can you do? It's an injury. Some other minor injuries that should be clear up before the season starts. Sam Laporta, hip injury. Ashton Genty might not be ready for the regular season, but it's not a long-term injury. He suffered a sprained ankle at practice on Sunday. Alvin Kamara is going to be out at least a month for New Orleans with a knee injury, so the Saints brought in Zamir White. And then Tyler Warren has a groin injury with Cleveland, but again, they expect him back and ready for week 1 if all goes according to plan, but sometimes injury recovery doesn't go according to plan, so just keep an eye on all of those right there. And then finally, some minor signings. Trevon Diggs goes to the Seattle Seahawks after the league announced that Terrion Arnold was going to be probably placed on the commissioner's exempt list to start the season. Seahawks needed to bring in another cornerback, so they bring in Trevon Diggs. Definitely not the same player he was during his heyday in Dallas. Good jamming up wide receivers, sometimes a little bit slow to read their moves. Zadarius Smith goes to the Atlanta Falcons after they obviously lose both Jalen Walker to injury and then James Pierce for a 9-game suspension. And Najee Harris signs with the Giants to give some competition all around between a pretty good running back room that doesn't really have a ceiling in Devin Singletary, Tyrone Tracy, Cam Scatterboot, and now Najee Harris. Good all around group. No one that really stands out among the rest. And then that is your NFL news for today. So let's get right over to the favorite part of every single offseason Grey Duck NFL show, and that is the Grey Duck Top 250. Again, Grey Duck Top 250 is the top 250 players in the NFL, how they will finish during the 2026 season, projecting forward, not relying just on their past pedigrees and resumes, but what their outlook is, in my mind, for 2026. And we get to this list of 250 by narrowing down the top 32 at each position and then obviously whittling those down even further. And today we're doing defensive tackles. As we get closer and closer to the start of the regular season, I have the top 32, my favorite 32 defensive tackles. One team has 3 current players and 1 prospective player on this list. And there are a lot of talented players to go all around. It's a pretty deep defensive tackle group. There were a couple guys that I had to leave off of this list that I really like as defensive tackles, Tier Tart being one of them, but I just think that there are a lot of really good defensive tackles in the NFL right now, and one that it might be coming back to the NFL. So number 32, we're going Poona Ford, big body for the Los Angeles Rams, run stopper with some upside as a pass rusher. More rotational for him, but when he's in the game, he is always effective. Then number 31, Jordan Davis of the Philadelphia Eagles. He just got a big extension. It was well-deserved. He can stop the run. He pairs nicely with Jalen Carter. Not as great of a pass rusher, but still can get the job done at times there as well. Number 30, Jajon Newton of the Washington Commanders. His pass rush win rate last year silently took a pretty good step forward for Washington. He's been behind a long list of guys in the Commanders team since being a projected first-round pick in 2024, falling to the second round for Washington that same draft, and then not living up to that hype in the first year of his career. Quietly had a pretty good year last year. I think he's going to take another step forward. I liked him coming out of the draft, so I'm projecting an even bigger move forward for him. Then Devon Hamilton of the Jacksonville Jaguars comes in at number 29. Just a reliable piece along that Jacksonville defensive line. And then a pair of, one former Bronco and one current Bronco. John Franklin Myers of the Tennessee Titans, a savvy old veteran that seems to have aged better and better year after year. And number 27 is Malcolm Roach of the Denver Broncos, who is another run stopper with pass rush upside that has done a pretty good job. Number 26, I'm going with Osa Odigizua with the San Francisco 49ers, coming over from the Dallas Cowboys in the offseason via trade. I like Osa Odigizua's he was good in Dallas. I think he has a chance to be great in San Francisco. They always seem to do really good at developing the defensive linemen that come their way. Number 25, Aaron Donald. I think he's going to be back for the 2026 season, and I can't fathom, I can't put a guy that's been out for 3 years back to the top of the league like he once was. There is a very real possibility that that could happen. Not a real high probability, but he could come in cold and automatically be one of the best defensive tackles. But I also am not going to kick this guy out of the top 32 if I think he's coming back. So I'm putting him right at number 25. I think that is a good, solid starting space. Again, I could see him just not miss a beat and skyrocket all the way up into the top 10 by the time this season is done. A'Shawn Robinson of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going to be working alongside both Kalijah Cansey and Vita Vea. Should do a lot of good there on that interior after some good years with Carolina. Deron Payne, a big-time pass rush winner from the Washington Commanders. Kobe Turner is coming in at number 22 of the Los Angeles Rams, and his teammate Braden Fisk at number 21. Both of these guys very unheralded, underrated defensive tackles, but they're both excellent at their positions. Number 20 is going to be Jalen Redmond of the Minnesota Vikings. Quick first step. step, shoots the gaps excellently, is a force in the run game, is even better as a pass rusher, had 6.5 sacks last year for Minnesota, and could have an even bigger year coming in 2026. Christian Barmore, number 19 for the New England Patriots, pairs nicely with a guy that we'll see later on in this list. Number 18, old reliable Chris Jones with the Kansas City Chiefs. Can't see him slip too far. Number 17, Juwan Briggs of the New York Jets. This surprised me, the numbers on him, the stats behind his play. You don't hear a lot about Juwan Briggs, but he makes a lot of stops against the run, makes a lot of stuffs, and he also has been one of the highest pressure getters as a defensive tackle over the last couple of seasons. So Juwan Briggs comes in at number 17. Number 16 is Christian Barmore's teammate, Milton Williams of the New England Patriots. Obviously, the big playoff run with the Eagles got his name into the spotlight and earned him a big contract for the 2025 season. The Patriots have reaped the benefits of that. Number 15, Nnamdi Madubuike. I think he's going to be back to the same levels he was with the Baltimore when he was healthy and not dealing with what was almost a career-ending neck injury. Number 14, Cam Hayward of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's old, but he still gets the job done. Number 13, DeForest Buckner of the Indianapolis Colts. He has been, obviously starting out in San Francisco, elite, has been at the very least great with Indianapolis ever since. Jalen Carter, number 12 with Philadelphia. Again, when his motor is running, he is almost impossible to start. The problem is his motor is not always running, and sometimes he spits in your face before the game and gets ejected. Number 11, Zach Allen of the Denver Broncos. All-pro sort of player. I really like him. Could see him even higher up in this list. Number 10, Derek Brown of the Carolina Panthers. Does a really good job against the run. A really good job against the quarterback as well. Number 9, Leonard Williams of the Seattle Seahawks. Number 8, maybe controversial, but I really liked the film that I saw from Walter Nolan III during his rookie season when he was healthy, when he returned from injury. I think he is going to make a major impact on this Cardinals defense and is going to solidify himself as a top 10 defensive tackle in the league for 2026. He comes in at number 8. Number 7 is Ed Oliver of the Buffalo Bills. Number 6, Caden McDonald. We talked about him earlier from the Houston Texans. Number 5, Byron Murphy II of the Seattle Seahawks. He is a nose tackle that is undersized, quote unquote, enough, but he always wins with leverage, and he can also penetrate into the backfield on pass rushes as well. Number 4 is Dexter Lawrence of the Cincinnati Bengals. Hopefully he does not continue to take steps back in 2026, but after taking steps back in 2025, but can return to his first half of the season 2024 form. Vita Vea, number 3, just coming off of the extension that we mentioned earlier of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Number 2 is Quinnen Williams of the Dallas Cowboys, and number 1, Jeffrey Simmons of the Tennessee Titans. He is your top defensive tackle in the NFL for 2026. Real quick, we'll run through that list one final time before packing it up and getting back to the grind of the next 2 days of training camp until our next show on Thursday. And we will run through right now. The number 1 is going to be Jeffrey Simmons of the Tennessee Titans. Number 2 is Quinnen Williams of the Dallas Cowboys. 3, Vita Vea of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 4, Dexter Lawrence of the Cincinnati Bengals. 5, Byron Murphy II of the Seattle Seahawks. 6, Caden McDonald of the Houston Texans. 7, Ed Oliver of the Buffalo Bills. 8, Walter Nolan III of Arizona. 9, Leonard Williams of the Seahawks. 10, Derek Brown of the Panthers. 11, Zach Allen of the Broncos. 12, Jalen Carter of the Eagles. 13, DeForest Buckner of the Indianapolis Colts. 14, Cam Hayward of the Pittsburgh Steelers. 15, Nnamdi Madubuike of the Baltimore Ravens. 16, Milton Williams of the New England Patriots. 17, Juwan Briggs of the New York Jets. 18, Chris Jones of the Kansas City Chiefs. 19, Christian Barmore of the New England Patriots. 20, Jalen Redmond of the Minnesota Vikings. 21, Braden Fisk of the Rams. 22, Kobe Turner of the Rams. Jerron Payne, number 23 of the Washington Commanders. Number 24 is Ashawn Robinson of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Number 25, Aaron Donald of the Los Angeles Rams, assuming he comes back. 26, Osa Odigizua of the San Francisco 49ers. 27, Malcolm Roach of the Denver Broncos. Number 28, John Franklin Myers of the Tennessee Titans. Number 29, Devon Hamilton of the Jacksonville Jaguars. 30 is Jerjon Newton of the Washington Commanders. 31, Jordan Davis of the Philadelphia Eagles. And number 32 on your list of top 32 defensive tackles for the 2026 season, it's Poona Ford of the Los Angeles Rams. That is your definitive inarguable list. Let me know if you do have arguments, though, in the comments below. We will be back here on the Grey Duck NFL Show for you on Thursday with more news, with another edition of the Grey Duck 250. I believe we're going to rank offensive tackles. Then we got edge rushers and quarterbacks to end things next week before we finally rank the top 250 players in the 2026 season based on all of the rankings that we had for them here. But a lot to look forward to. Again, like, subscribe, do all the things in order to help this show grow, because I think it provides a lot of really fun analysis. And that's it for this episode of the Grey Duck NFL show. Thanks for listening. If you got something out of it, a subscribe, a rating, a share goes a long way. We'll be back on Thursday with more NFL talk. It's straight takes, no fluff. That's the Grey Duck way. Enjoy the rest of training camp, and we will catch you back here on Thursday.